Yes.
How's that?
Oh, that sounds good.
Oh. Well, I'm going to start here.
Okay.
So let me, hey, Julia, how you doing?
I'm stressed out because I'm
Ooh.
moving.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're moving.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want
As you can
to,
tell from the background, you see how there's nothing.
oh, that's always so sad. It's both sad when there's nothing up on the walls, but then, kind of exciting every once in a while to confront new walls.
Oh, it's super exciting. I know I'll never move into a place that has such blue walls.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll be interesting. I don't know. It's a new adventure. I'm calling it the Magical Mystery Tour, but we're going to end up in DC in around mid-November.
That's very exciting. And I, of course, am in DC about 40% of the year. So our loyal viewers and listeners may get a chance to see us in the same room
I was
someday.
thinking, like, what if we should dance together?
Oh. Okay. Okay. I'll do it. Speaking of dancing, the song that we did for the discussion on the Hispanic heritage,
Oh, in these
Miss,
shoes?
ah, no, Hispanic heritage. It was Mi Swing es Tropical.
Oh, we didn't do in these shoes. That was another one.
That was another one. Mi Swing
Yeah.
es Tropical. So I was
Yeah.
at a really great conference earlier this week called Osmosis. It's a conference on open source intelligence. And so they asked me for my walk up song. And so that was the first time that I introduced Mi Swing es Tropical as my walk up song. And the woman on stage introducing me, she began to dance to the song. And so I walked up to the stage dancing, which was,
Oh, delight.
very exciting to the
And gets you
audience.
going and gets the audience going. And I
Yes.
heard good things. I heard good things about osmosis in your talk.
Wow. I'm not, who would you have heard that from?
Oh, just LinkedIn, my only place that
Oh,
I
yes. Yeah.
go there.
The LinkedIn stuff was good. Yes.
Yeah.
And I need to say this. So I know generally our topic today is going to be about women. And I want to say that when I was in New Orleans, I spent Tuesday before I flew back to DC with the daughter of a longtime friend of mine.
Mm.
And she's awesome. And what she is doing in New Orleans, uh, buying and then renovating older homes and then making sure that these homes go to people that will respect them and take care of them and are naturally part of the fabric of the neighborhood
Mm-hmm.
is incredible. And
Wow.
she has a work crew. As you know, many Hispanics came to New Orleans after Katrina to help in the rebuilding of it. And one of the things she does is find houses for her crew. And she sort of finances the house herself. They and the rest of the crew work on fixing it up because they're always fixer uppers. And then all of a sudden, the quality of life of these people has tremendously improved. I was so blown away with what she was doing. I actually asked her if she'd ever like to be on Pandas playing
I
cello,
was
and
just about to say we should have her on. That would
and
be
she
cool.
demurred, but not like permanently. She goes, I don't know, and I go, well, I'll come back to you on that.
I forgot to tell Brooks that I was recording.
Yes.
Now he's gone.
Okay. Well, that's great. So I just finished posting on the community page the essay that you wrote on LinkedIn about grieving and what's going on in the Israeli Hamas situation. And I will say I was just on the campus of Columbia University on Thursday, and you could just feel the tension in the air on this topic, and in fact, more than just feel it, you could hear the sounds throughout the campus of the
Yeah.
tension on this topic.
Yeah.
So why don't you start off by going over some of those points that you made in the article? We've reposted it, so if you want to read all the text, it's in the community tab of the channel Cosas de Osos.
Yeah, sure. I went to an event from the Harvard group, Women in Defense Diplomacy and Development. And the feeling there was similar, this feeling of almost like not knowing what to do. And they found the article helpful, I think. Well, they said they did. Um, because
Good.
the question is, what do you do? Like, people feel paralyzed, like they want to do the right thing, and they want to say the right thing to their friends who are Jewish, or their friends who are Palestinian, their friends who are Israeli, or just anyone. And they don't know what the right thing is. And that's kind of the first point. That's, I think, the underlying point of the article is that when people are in grief, there is no right thing, but the wrong thing is to not allow the grief.
Yes.
So that's the wrong thing.
I want to interject something along the way. Are you interruptible now?
Yeah, I'm uninterruptible at any time.
Okay.
And I'll keep talking if not interrupted.
You reminded me of something a friend of mine said to me. She tragically lost her husband many years ago now, but you can tell just because I've been with her and traveled with her that she still grieves. And, she's remarried and has been in her current marriage for, I think close to 30 years. And what she said to me once, she goes, people don't know what to say when people are grieving. And this is a very personal thing. And she said she found that the best thing people said to her was they would call her and they would just say, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Mm-hmm. To prompt the conversation rather than "How are you feeling?" or some other kind of inept introduction. Sorry, what did you say?
Well, that could be right, but it could also be wrong.
Yes.
If someone, so it's like, so the concern about wanting to say the right thing, I think, is the thing to drop. So I think the thing to drop is like, just say something. And if you're and if you're authentic with the person, if you say, I don't know what to say, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I'm thinking about you, or whatever's on your mind, like that's going to be the right thing, right? So it's authentic human connection with compassion.
Yes.
The words that come out of your mouth are really not that important, as long as the person can feel the authentic human compassion.
Yes.
That's sort of, so that underlies the whole article. But in the article, I talk about how, we have this fantasy that we can make good diplomatic decisions, good decisions about defense, good decisions about development, as long as we're coming from a rational point of view without an emotional underpinning, because emotions will bias us. And I'm sorry, but there's just no scientific evidence that you're ever coming from a place that is rational or doesn't have an emotional underpinning. There's zero evidence for that. There's always an emotional motivation, even if you behave as if there's no emotional motivation. And so the point is to start asking the question, from what emotional states do we best make decisions? Because we're going to be coming from an emotional state. Mm-hmm. So, like, ask a different question. What states are the decisions made from that really work, or that really help move us forward? And I was comparing the state of vehemence, like, I know what to do. This is what has to happen. I'm angry and I have this conviction that's very clear, and things seem simple, sort of, and I'm going to argue in this way. That's an emotional state of vehemence, versus the state of grief, which is being really in touch with what has been lost. Not only the people who have been lost, the potential that has been lost, the potential for peace that has been lost, and that this is a place, because it's more real, because it's more in touch with the actual, people on the ground, the hearts that have been affected, that is a place from which we could better make decisions. And I don't mean a place from like grief-driven rage, which is a whole different emotional state. I mean, from actually recognizing your grief and actually being with your grief. And just that we don't do that. I don't know why. I sort of have this fantasy of like at least a week or 2 week long ceasefire that's protected by the international community. And the purpose of the ceasefire is just to grieve and get humanitarian aid to whomever needs it, and to go through the grief and to hear each other wail and to hear each other, talk about the people who were lost, and on regardless of what your origin is in Israel. And so that feels to me like something that in the future we'll move towards as we start to recognize the power of grief to help find solutions, rather than covering up with vehemence or this idea that things are simple or that we know what to do. Anyway, that's basically the article.
No, just hearing you talk about it, I think of grief. Being together in grief is as a moment for listening. That when you're with someone, I mean, I've been in sessions with someone who had a loved one just passed, and you're just sitting there waiting for them to say something, but it's a companionable silence, and waiting for you to think of something to say that you think is helpful, or
not say anything, or just be,
or captures how you feel at the moment, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I spent more than 3 decades in a national security career, and I was thinking, when I knew we were going to talk about this topic, how often I, as a professional, felt grief. I remember very clearly, I was just 4 years into my agency career in 1982 when the Beirut embassy was bombed and the CIA lost many individuals, as did the State Department, including the director of the office I worked in, who happened to have been in Beirut making a visit. And that was really, really difficult. And you felt the grief, and of course you felt the anger as well. But with that exception, usually we're pretty good. Well, good is the wrong word to use here. Maybe I should say we're pretty bad at divorcing ourselves from those emotions and just concentrating on doing our work, which of course it has to be done. But that's not necessarily a healthy option. That's not necessarily what we should be doing.
Well, it's not even not necessarily. It's not a healthy option.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of evidence that that's what produces trauma, right?
Yes. But
so, yeah.
But the reason,
I get it, that there's this idea that in order to do the work that you need to do, you have to be in a different state. And so actually, I have this little, one of the few things in my room is this little demonstration.
Is that a yoga mat?
Oh, over there is the yoga mat.
Oh, I see.
The purple. That's just my yoga mat.
Oh, I see. So that's
this napkin thing is this little demonstration about, and I think I'll explain it in a second, but I want to get to it. The idea that you can push down an emotion, and then that's how you're going to get to be able to do your work. And I know you can be paralyzed by grief and you just can't function. And then other people who are less close to the situation have to both support you and do the work that you were supposed to be doing. And that's just human. That's how humans function, and that's okay. Like, that's actually, to my mind, you just have a system where it's actually, this is we could put an article up about this. I think it's called the circles of care system or something. But basically, the person who's most affected or closest to the situation is in the center.
Is what?
Is in the center of the circle.
It's in the center, yes.
And all care flows inward. And so the next circle around them are their closest friends and colleagues. And so their care flows inward. But then the circle around them are people who are friends and colleagues of those, and family of those who are in the first circle. So you don't ask for anything from someone who's deeper in the circle than you, and you give to the person deeper in the circle than you, but you ask for things in the other direction. And so it's a system that I think, if employed in the intelligence community, just explicitly, I mean, there's this great article about how to care for yourself when you're, there's many articles recently about trauma in the intelligence community, one by Rand, one a report from Rand that I think is really excellent. But
yes,
but explicit use of the circles of care model could put people into a situation where, like, of course, the person in the center of the circle isn't going to be doing any analyses of the situation. They're in a state of grief. We're going to support them, and we're going to have to pick up that work, and this is how we're going to do it. So that feels to me like that's a way to make better decisions, but also a way to produce a situation where you have a culture where there's less trauma that gets passed down. Because last time when we were talking about Israel and Hamas, you said, look, I've been inured to it. Like, you're really feeling this, you said to me, but I've been inured to it. And inuring yourself to that puts a whole community not only at risk for trauma, but at risk for not seeing opportunities to do things differently.
Right.
Because it's like, we can handle this. We know how to keep pushing forward. Everyone else should just be able to handle this too.
Right.
That's just not true.
Right. And in fact, and this is true of both sides in the conflict, the fact that both the Palestinians and the Israelis believe they can handle this, they can personally handle the toll that is inflicted on them by decades and decades of war and strife and fear and anger. The fact that they believe they can handle it contributes to it continuing. If you
think they believe they can handle it. I don't think they do believe that.
Well, I do think they believe it. At least they say it, and they feel, I think, social pressure to act as if they can handle it. So
maybe the leaders, but when you talk to people, Israelis and Palestinians, they're like, this is horrible, this has to end. I mean, many of them, right?
Many of them, but not all. Some of them say, we're going to go back.
They're certainly not all.
Not all, right.
Right. But I don't think there's a country in the world in which everyone agrees on things like this. So
of course not.
Everyone's at this different level of their processing of the grief, and their different level of grief, and their different decisions about what to do about it. But I think that you could actually get to a better decision by actually listening to that rather than sort of any other method.
Well, two thoughts here. I always railed against the false equivalence that the intelligence community made between objectivity in our analysis and lack of emotional content. So we would not use emotional words or even often talk about emotional things.
Right. Psychology is actually like a bad word. Like, that's kind of fruity. Yeah.
And I personally believe that was wrong, because the parties to the dispute that we're trying to analyze have a lot of emotions going on.
Everyone does.
Of course, everyone does. And if we don't acknowledge that, we're not really understanding the situation. And then
how do you predict human? I mean, when I first heard about what the intelligence community does, I'm like, oh, I bet they're all really into psychology because they're trying to predict human behavior.
No.
But that's bizarre.
They would love to reduce it to just super factual things. And I'm going to pick up my phone because I have to find a quote here that I read yesterday.
Okay.
About this desire for certainty that we have just as humans.
Yeah, it drives the field of behavioral economics. What's the equation that's going to describe human behavior?
And it was something that a good friend of mine shared. Someone in the Financial Times wrote an article commenting on Sam Bankman-Fried, the cryptocurrency guy who's been arrested. I think you're going to like this. I'm going to quote it all. It's about 3 sentences. At the roots of math chauvinism, maths, is a childlike craving for certainties, or at least probabilities, amid the flux of adult experience. It is a horror of life's messiness, Arrogance. I love this line. Arrogant is often next of kin to fear, which is very similar to something you wrote in your piece, vehemence. And for all of Friedman's intellectual swagger, he strikes me as unable to navigate the world without the guardrails of absolute belief.
Yeah. Yeah. Having been raised, I got to bring my father into this because I studied him. He's a theoretical physicist, very smart, but very childlike, almost probably on the autism spectrum. And he would always say that if you just figure out the equation to describe something, then you can control it. I mean, like literally, he would say things like that. And I'd be like, Dad, do you want control over nature? Because it's never.
Well, I often
like,
say
so we get these arguments.
My glib statement is that the worst instinct of human beings is the desire to control others. But it's not just others, it's just the desire to control. It should just be period, the desire to control, point.
Well, the deepest fear, right, is that we're not in control. And the reason it's such a deep fear is because we all know it's true.
Yes, exactly.
It wouldn't be as deep a fear if we didn't secretly know that absolutely do we not have control, right? And actually, this leads to the gender thing. So we said this was going to be about women. We were talking.
Yes, and we haven't talked about women yet.
But we have.
But we are women. We are women.
Yeah, but also, so women are a big minority. In fact, we're numeric majority, but we are a big minority in the sense of social status. And one of the things you learn, regardless of what minority you are, if you're not when I'm using minority in the way of just being having less status than a group that has more status. Mm-hmm. One thing that you learn is how to navigate not being in control of your life and the circumstances of your life, right?
It's like being the youngest child.
Right. At any moment, like you could get pregnant, right? Or things can happen to you, even biologically, I got my period, which I did not control. So you have a lot of experience. I'm talking now about women who were born female. There are also women who weren't born female who still have less control than men, regardless of whether they were born men or more male or not, because of the culture, right? And what does that give you? What is the gift? What is the gift here? And what is the gift for the intelligence community? And what is the gift for the diplomacy community and the defense community of including women? And it feels like there's many gifts, but one of them is this, you're importing the capacity to not be so afraid of being out of control and to navigate ambiguity better. And this is a powerful capacity that is obviously much needed. I would just say we don't even need to argue that. But I wanted to make a point. That's why I have this little demonstration over here. So I wanted to make, this is a nerdy point. So I'm going to explain it to the non-science nerds. So maybe if you've ever heard of something like local minimum or a local maximum.
I've heard of that. I'm not sure what it means, but I've heard of it.
Right. Okay. So now you're going to know what it means. So imagine this napkin is like, let's flip it over so you're not distracted by the label. Okay. So this napkin is sort of the landscape. It's a 3-dimensional landscape of the correct solutions to a particular problem. Okay. And the y-axis, the up and down part, is telling you how much of a problem the solution will cause, and so how much follow-on damage the solution will have.
Okay.
So you want a low spot, right? Because it's a good solution that has less follow-on damage. Okay. So you could sort of graph out diplomatic solutions that way if you wanted to do that. And we were just talking about how that's too simplistic, but in any case, I'm doing this analogy, so I'm sticking with that for the moment. So now you have a little ball, right? A little marble or something. And the idea is that when you're exploring a landscape like that, and I'm going to do this without holding up the napkin because I have one hand on the microphone, your ball is going up and down. And over time in history, people sort of realize, okay, these types of solutions are at this low level. So the ball sort of explores the space and you go, okay, here's the type of solutions that are really good. Okay. Because they keep coming to this low level where there's fewer follow-on problems. And that's wisdom. I mean, you develop this wisdom, you develop this expertise. That's what experts have. Okay. Now here's the key question that needs to be answered when you find one of these little dips where there's good solutions with few follow-on problems. The question is this a local minimum? In other words, is there even a lower spot, like, I don't know, over here, that I'm not exploring because I'm so used to doing this and I don't even go over there?
Right.
So what women coming into those communities can do is say, we get that you've been doing it like this and you found this local minimum, and that is not wrong. That is not bad. That has been helpful. But we're going to start exploring in spaces you didn't even look in, because we do things differently, culturally, biologically, whatever you want to call it. We are doing things differently. We have different experiences about navigating ambiguity. Maybe we're going to find a global minimum, or at least another local minimum that's even lower on the landscape. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I think is, yeah, it's under discussed as this benefit. It's usually thought of as like, well, we need to bring women in to be fair. But honestly, I think we need to bring women in to find different solutions that might actually be better.
I agree. And I think it's a very powerful example for the benefits of diversity of thought, diversity of experiences, and I guess diversity of emotions. I know there was a LinkedIn picture just recently of an event that I was at that was the title of it was actually The New IC, the New Intelligence Community. And a couple of grumpalicious, grumpy guys have commented on the pictures that just happened to feature women. There were men and women at the event. About, well, there they are again, talking about that useless topic of diversity, not paying attention to what is the real world and, you know, what's really going on. And I think that the tragedy of human existence is that we have for too long allowed narrow slices of individuals define the real world, define the napkin.
Yeah.
And we need to explore other solutions, and that involves listening to other voices. So I completely agree with that, with the logic of it.
Yeah, and we're talking about it as women, but we could also talk about it. You could talk about it as a person of color, same situation. Mm-hmm. You could talk about it as queer people. So there's all sorts of. Most humans are not the ones who have been defining the space.
That's true. No matter what, I think that's undeniable. No matter where you're coming from. Yeah. Even if you're a part of the male patriarchy, you have to admit that most humans have not been involved in defining the space and in looking for, I don't want to use the word solutions, but looking for progress.
Yeah. Addressing problems. I like that. Yeah. And honestly, the many men I know from both sides of the aisle do not love the current situation. I don't think this is a male versus female issue or men versus women issue. I think this is, people are starting to realize, and I don't think this is a woke versus, I guess, a sleep issue. I think whatever. I think people are starting to realize, like, we need all hands on deck. So it's just, we need capable hands on deck. And so who are those hands and how can we get them on deck? And how can we let go of old biases that might tell us that there's one way to do things?
The most
things.
Yeah. The most significant intellectual epiphany I ever had was when I was introduced to complexity theory. In the 90s, at some point, I read the book Complexity by a journalist, Mitch Waldrop. Yeah. And I realized that all the ways I had been thinking and analyzing situations had been incomplete and flawed. And one of the things I got to thinking about that, because one of the tenets of complexity is that the individual agents in a system start interacting, well, always interact with each other. And when they start interacting differently, even though it seems low level at the time, that can lead to a significant dramatic change in the system. So one of the things I thought about was when women were given the vote in the early 20th century, or rather when women earned the vote in the early 20th century, we introduced a dramatic new dynamic into the political and social systems of the planet. And, you know, there are people like Peter Thiel, or Thiel, I guess he says his name, who argue that this has been very bad and we need to take away. I think he's, whether in jest or not, he has said things like that. And as an analyst, my hypothesis is that the inclusion of women in the political and social systems of the planet eventually will have a significant effect on political and social systems. I already think we have seen some of that. So, for example, it's just much harder to mobilize countries to go to war now. It still happens, but it's a more difficult thing. And then the reaction of the mothers to the loss of their children matters a lot more in how long the war continues and how it's carried out. Yes.
Didn't you say something about after 9/11?
Yes, after 9/11,
yeah,
we had a discussion just among women as to what 9/11 really meant.
But it was arranged by a man.
It was arranged by a man, that's right. And we had one of the questions that the women asked when we were convened was, where were the mothers during all of this? So I think that it's, you know, if the theories of complexity are correct, and I believe they are, that we are slowly, but I think surely going to see some significant changes to the better, for the better, in our political and social systems. I am currently in the little town of Falls Church. I've most recently become a Texas resident, but I still have a house here and spend time in Falls Church. And they're in the midst of their local election season. So I used to vote in the city of Falls Church, and it's a local community. And I just found it very difficult to make heads or tails out of the local politics. And so I finally decided 20 years ago, I said, you know, I'm just going to vote for the women. I don't
do the same thing. That's so
I don't even investigate what party they're on or anything. I just go woman, 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 woman. And then if there's not enough women running, then I make some strange choice about the remaining slot that I have to fill. But I
do the same thing.
I just decided it was just as good a method as any. And and there you go.
You really can't tell what people are going to do, but I'm not saying women are going to be better or bring world peace at all. But I do know that when this happened with Israel and Hamas, I just kept thinking, like, you know, as a mother, like you put so much effort into these kids. You know, you put so much effort into them. Like, are you kidding me? You're not taking my work, my biggest project of my life.
Yes.
And destroying it like that when we can't figure out what to do. Like, we're going to be very careful about this. I don't mean that war is never okay. None of that. It's just that, like, you got to be very careful.
Right.
Don't mess with my boy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I just feel like that decision,
and that has always
be really good.
I think, you know, in addition to women having the vote, which is, I changed the view toward war, also smaller families has changed the view toward young men being expendable. I mean, God forgive me for even saying a phrase like that. And I think about China that has had a one-child policy for 3 decades, I think, and what it means for a nation of only children to go to war. I don't have an answer, but I just know that dynamic is important when we think about that issue as it relates to China. And of course, it relates everywhere because everyone has smaller families and fewer progeny. I wanted to bring up one last thing before we end. That's one of the things that women are purported to be is more empathetic than men. I don't know if you think that's true. And one of the sad things about empathy is that people without empathy or with too little empathy often can manipulate and take advantage of people with a lot of empathy.
Well, the vice versa can be true as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But empathy can almost be like a disease. So like you care, so you're always trying to fix everything, and you can't.
That's empathy, right? So distinguishing, I think we'll put an article up here about distinguishing empathy from compassion. So compassion is the piece that's actually healthier. So like you need empathy, of course, to understand what's going on with other people, and without it, you're a sociopath. Okay, fine. And what you want to work on is compassion. So, okay, I get where you're coming from. I get what you're feeling. Now I'm going to have compassion, which means I'm going to feel with you towards the good. I'm going to do some action, compassionate action towards the good, towards supporting positive change. And that's how, we'll have to do a whole nother one about unconditional love and what that means and what the boundaries are there. But yeah, I think that women have trained to be more empathic, have been trained to be more empathic, consciously or unconsciously. That doesn't mean they always are. But I think part of that training comes by necessity. Like if you have to troubleshoot, if you're the top predator, you really don't have to worry about being prey. And so you actually lose your capacity to navigate what it must like to be prey. Right? But if you're prey, you're smarter at getting out of situations that are going to be rough for you and anticipating them. So sorry to think of it in that way sometimes.
No,
it's not that way.
Yeah, it's a very impactful way to think of it.
Yeah. So we are actually also going to put some stuff in we didn't talk about it much, but ways to protect yourself from trauma when you're in the intelligence community investigating.
There was an article written about that recently, correct?
Yeah.
Or not about is it about the intelligence community and trauma?
It's for people who are using OSINT, but it's from
open
Bellingcat.
Source intelligence. Yes.
Yeah. So we'll put that in the notes, and we're not going to show dance today because we're still too close to it. But when we do come back to show dancing, it will be for taking care of ourselves, because sometimes dancing is, I like to say, the way to wash everything out.
Yeah, dancing it does feel very, very good when you move your whole body in relation to a feeling. Is a very good thing to do.
Agree.
So do you think we'll be able to do another one before you hit the road, or?
I don't know. I'll probably do one from the road. I'll bring my equipment, I'll bring my microphone, and I'll be in some hotel and we'll do it.
Great. Well, thank you for listening, particularly anyone that's listened all the way through. And I can tell that some people, amazing, Julia, some people actually listen all the way through.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think they must be working out. So I hope you have a good workout.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And if you like it, you can hit the subscribe button. It doesn't cost anything. It's just a way of YouTube tracking how how engaged people are with our content. And then they recommend it to other people. The YouTube engine recommends it to other people.
And they do give you a little notification that a new one has come out.
That's right. And they give you a little notification. So you can like the video, you can subscribe to it. But in any case, thank you so much for listening.
You could add comments.